I might, if you've any questions or if you're too shy to ask questions, you can put in private questions at the bottom and I'll ask them for you. We won't reveal names. So over to you, Cxema.
Very good. Thank you very much, Emmet. Welcome everybody. Thank you for your time and choosing this evening to be with us when you could be doing something else. It comes to show that maybe there is something this year in the rules that has piqued your interest. Everybody knows Emmet, so I need no introduction, although he would like me to say he's a stand-up guy and an all-round good fella. But anyway, as he said that earlier, I scribbled it out. Now, we are going to start, and what is the objective of this session is important, because we are looking at the rules, the rule changes from the competitor's point of view, and maybe from the coach's point of view. We are not gonna focus on what it means for race committees, for judges, or for umpires at this point. Sessions like that, I'm sure they'll be planned later on with Irish sailing for those interested. Now, changes in this cycle. Before we get into that, if everybody's familiar with the normal or the agreed pyramid of performance in sailing, you will know that the racing rules increasingly play an important role as the level of the competition increases. So it's remiss of those sailors that do not want to engage and learn them well, so they can exploit them to the maximum advantage. Having said that, we're going to look at what those changes are at the moment. There is no huge changes in the book. Most of it is housekeeping, language consistency, adding a structural consistency between the sections, etc., and bringing text that has been used for a long time in sending instructions into the book. But there are a few, from a sailor's point of view, important changes, and those are game-changing, in particular two, I would say. But we're going to go through these important changes now. The first one. This has been a hot topic. I'll be surprised if to date you haven't heard about this change yet. The main change in the definition of finish and the definition of start is that the text accrue or equipment in the normal position has been removed from the definition, which means when starting and when finishing, only the hull is going to be counted. And the subsequent question comes in: what is the hull? And these are where all the discussion has been over the last few months, I think, if you've been reading anything about it. But let's go. So how are we going to define what a hull is? Are the bowsprit counted? Prods, molded built-in prods like wild oats, inverted bows, how are they going to be looked at, even if they are under the water? You have skiff wings, you have hiking racks. You can, for the race committees, the difficult job of having to try to get that boat on the bottom picture with the spinnaker to lure to give him a finish. And that's going to be potentially difficult enough. So when we're looking at what a hull is, it's not so much how we define the hull, it's how the protest committee, when you're going to face them, are going to interpret this. How are they going to decide this? Okay. Now, we looked at these items just a minute ago, whether a bowsprit, fixed prod, built-in prod, skip wings, and hiking racks are done. But at the bottom of it, it's up to the protest committee at the moment to interpret what a hull is. Let me explain. For the time being, because there's no other guidance yet about it. So if the notice of race and the sailing instructions are silent, hull is not defined in the racing rules of sailing. So we use the term as is intended in general use or nautical use. So go to the dictionary and find out what it is. However, if the notice of race and sailing instructions can bring definitions, and they do it in two ways, either through the class rules or the equipment rules of sailing. There's a further guidance that comes in from a Q&A just in January 2021 that tends to link or tries to link the equipment rules of sailing's definition of hull into a general sense. And basically this definition says the wings and hiking racks are part of the hull and the bowsprits are not. Simple to a point, but believe me, it's a matter of great discussion for race officials at the moment. Now we're gonna look at this definition on how the equipment rules of sailing look at it. Equipment rules of sailing have this text at the beginning or early on in the terminology that says a term used in the equipment racing rules is defined if it's printed in bold is defined in the equipment rules of sailing. If it's in italic, is defined in the racing rules. Now, and then they go on to define what the hull is. Is the shell, including any transom, the deck, including any superstructure, the internal structure, including any cockpit, the fittings, and note that this is in bold, associated with these parts, and any corrector weights. So they are defined as well. Now, what a lot of the class rules are doing, and over the next year, I say we'll see a normalization process in some of them. They bring this exact text and say, these class rules shall be read in conjunction with the equipment rules of sailing, and measurements shall be taken in accordance with these unless specified. Where a term is used in its defined sense is printed in bold type if defined in the equipment rules of sailing, and in italic if it's defined in the racing rules of sailing. We can find this text in the J80 class rules, J109s, IRC, ECHO is working on it, 49ers, mods, etc. But then the term has to appear in bold in the class rules. So the J80 class, the IRC have hull as defined in the equipment rules of sailing, but the J109 class does not have. So presumably the J109 is using a different definition, potentially using a different definition. Okay, now this is the boring part, I hope. These questions and answer guidance says exactly the same thing. What is the applicable definition of hull? And the term hull is not defined in the racing rules of sailing. You have to use it in the introduction terminology, which prescribes that other words are used in the sense ordinarily understood in the nautical or general use. Now, it comes to repeat what we just saw before, and it tells us the bowsprits, fixed or retractable, are not part of the hull, and that the wings of a skiff, fixed or retractable, are part of the hull. Now, the problem with this guidance is it's not authoritative. So a protest committee doesn't necessarily have to look into this. Now, this is probably the most talked about change, not necessarily the most important change from from a sailor's point of view, unless you want to start contesting the race officials in their calls for Phoenix, etc. You just have to know that it'll be the hull, and it's likely to be, in the normal sense, what it will be counted. Now, the next change is twofold. It's to do with sailing the course. It's a new definition that appears in the book and changes in the rules around sailing the race. Now, this is a new definition, but it's not a new text. This text comes from Rule 28.2. It used to live in there, and basically is the one that talks about the line around the marks when drawn taut passes each mark on the course for the race on the required side in the correct order, touches each mark that is designated as rounding, and passes between marks on a gate, etc. All it's trying to do is simplify many instances where the expression sail the course was used in the racing rules book. Now, where the bigger change happens is here. Not a new expression,
although it's not a new expression, has a little change. Excuse me for a second. Emmet, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
This is my airport has decided to fail.
Now you're gone.
No.
Now you're back.
Yeah, I back again. Yeah. Okay. Now, so this language is placing a stronger emphasis on the sequence of events. You have to start, you have to sail the course, and then finish. Two things are important here. The new definition of finish says that a boat has to, after starting, finish. So if you're OCS, you cannot finish. Okay. But the most important change and the first takeaway, I think, of today is that there's a stronger language about when a boat may correct any errors in sailing the course. And those errors really have to be done. Those corrections have to be done before crossing the finishing line to finish. When does a boat cross the finishing line to finish? If you're running laps, is the last time. It doesn't necessarily mean that if you cross the finish line and you forgot and you get a signal and you forgot to do a mark, you can go back. You have finished. You can no longer correct your error. Okay, so that's to me one of the important things to remember. It was there before. It was not as clear. Interpretations will be, I think, a lot stricter around this. Now, the other change is in Rule 2, fair sailing. This is a simple change, but an important one. There was an experiment done over the last 4 years to say that if you broke fair sailing rules, Rule 2, you could get a DSQ or a DNE. This time, it's just going back to the old way, it's a DNE. Now, I think, Emmet, perhaps we can ask and see if anybody can have a show of hands, if they think they know what the recognized principles of sportsmanship and fair play are. Where can we find them? You know, how are protest committees looking at this, and how we know what is a breach of Rule 2 or not? Emmet?
So where do we find these, Cxema? Where are these things? So we want to.
Is anybody offering any feedback?
No, I'm not getting a lot of feedback.
Okay. So one of the most important rules, and what it could be the way out, because you cannot be penalized if you don't know what a recognized principle of a sportsmanship and fair play is. And if you ask a protest committee, can you show me where these are, and they don't know, they can hardly penalize you, can they? Now, they're buried somewhere. They are actually in the misconduct guidance, and they are important and they are detailed. The link is there. I'm sure we'll be able to pass in the link. It's worth having a look. But it includes respect for the rules, for the competitors, for the officials, for the boats, and other elements. So it's not a bad idea every now and then to have a look at what they are. Because, for example, the boat that touches a mark and gets stuck on a mark and waits for someone to protest and nobody protests, or sorry, somebody protests, he can get very, very much done for a Rule 2 infringement because he knowingly was breaking a rule. Anyway, just something for you to think about. The next change, it is probably one of the most important ones, one of the messiest ones, and it has a lot of changes within it. Rule 16.2 was a rule that limited the actions of a starboard tack boat when a port tack boat was going to sail astern of the other boat. Now, this has changed slightly. This now applies upwind on a beat to windward, and we need to look at what on a beat to windward means, because it's an interpreted term. It has some limitations, but also, you know, so you need to know when this rule applies. So, but it no longer applies downwind. So we just rely on 16.1, changing course. If you're changing course downwind, you have to give room for the other boat to keep clear. Now, and also they've changed the text. Pass astern is no longer the definer of this. It's pass to leeward. When the overall actions of the boat are to pass to leeward of the other boat, then it's complying with that part of the rule. And the only limitation that we now have on the starboard boat is that he shall not bear away. Before it was change course, now it's bear away. So the starboard boat can now luff. So there's an opportunity there. And the key part of this is any change of course by any response by the port tack boat had to be immediate. The need had to be immediate to alter course, to change course immediately, to continue keeping clear. Now, that hasn't gone away. But now, as we've seen in a practical example with Emmet, that gives us some leeway. Now, the question, as you can see, is in the old rule, said when after the starting signal, a port tack boat was keeping clear. Now it doesn't say that. So does it apply before the starting signal? How are we going to find that out? The answer is yes, but it's buried again in what we are going to look at. And we need again to define what is on a beat to windward. Those are the key parts of the changes. So it is a complex change.
I think that last bit might be a bit, that last bit about what is on a beat to windward might seem really obvious, but actually it's like the racing rules are not that obvious sometimes. And what is on a beat to windward? I think we might need to just touch on that.
Yes, so we will for a second in a minute, but the place where you're going to find this, and the casebook, the World Sailing Casebook has now been just released. It has a new version of case 132, and that's where you're going to find that information. So it's a case, it's interesting, you should get familiar. Is together with case 50 is going to be, case 50 is the one port to starboard and reasonable apprehension. You will need to know this case as you move up in the rankings or go to important events outside of Ireland. Let's look at this. Emmet, do you want to take this one on?
Yeah, thanks. I think so. The top scenario, the guy in yellow is on port, the guy in blue is on starboard. And you can see, I'm not sure if you can see where it says positions 1, 2, 3, 4, but anyway, if you can't, not to worry. Essentially, what you weren't able to do before, apart from match racing, we're taking match racing out of this. So if you're watching the America's Cup and you're watching these guys, starboard guy coming down or dialing down as they call it, that's okay in match racing to a certain extent.
No, it's no longer okay either in match racing or team racing, but they've taken it out as well.
Okay, certainly not okay in fleet racing.
Yeah,
most of us are doing. So you
could get away with it.
Huh?
You could try and get away with it.
Yeah, but, a hard one. So you weren't able to do that, and now you're still not able to do that. So you can't just bear away and dial down and go for somebody. So that hasn't changed. What has changed is in the scenario at the bottom. The blue boat is now allowed to luff as the yellow boat is bearing away. Before you weren't allowed to do that.
And one of the key issues when the boat is luffing is that the requirement for immediately changing course on the port tack boat is removed. Your only obligation while you're luffing is to give them room to keep clear, even if they have to alter course immediately. And this comes because this rule is a safety rule in many ways to avoid dial downs and the risk going downwind or going through the power zone downwind. It's a lot higher than as you are going up and luffing. Okay, so that is another one to keep in mind as changes go. Now, on the bit to windward part, this is what you will find in that case 132. Two boats on opposite tacks are on a bit to windward when after their starting signal, so it only applies after the starting signal. The course each of them will choose in order to sail the course and finish as soon as possible in the absence of all of the boats is close hauled or above. Or, and this is where a lot of the confusion comes from, one or both of them are overstanding a close haul ley line to the next mark. A boat on the windward side of a close haul ley line to a leeward mark is not overstanding the ley line is above that ley line. Now, in the past, the text in the previous version of the case said this mark may be a windward rounding mark, passing or limit mark, a windward gate, or a finishing mark. In other words, it was talking or indicating we were talking about a windward leg. Now that is not the case. It's any rounded mark, any passing or limit mark, and any gate mark or a finishing mark. And this is important because it does apply to all marks. You can be sailing upwind to windward to a leeward mark if you find yourself with strong currents, etc. And we are going to see, and all the marks have regardless of what the mark is, all the marks have a close haul ley line. You can draw it in all the marks. So what happens is they've come up with a number of scenarios to indicate this, but again, it's on a bit to windward, not on a windward leg, and this could apply to any mark on the course potentially. So you have to bear in mind. Now, I can find the situations where you might be on a bit to windward to a leeward mark. However, I see very difficult that you probably will be trying to play with this rule in trying to limit in the options of another boat, unless you are close to match racing for an event win. Okay. Now, the next one, 20.4. If everybody remembers, Rule 20 is about room to tack and obstruction. It goes through the procedure that a boat has to follow when, hailing for room to tack, what the procedure is for a boat to respond to the hail of room to tack. And now, it also deals with how do you pass the hail when you have several boats in a stack to windward of you. Now, this is a new rule. This is important, not so much for what it tries to achieve, but because, as you know, what they are saying is when conditions are such that a hail might not be heard, the boat shall also make a signal that clearly indicates her need for room to tack or her response. And it allows that the notice of race may specify an alternative communication for a boat to indicate her need for room to tack or her response, and requires boats to use it. Now, this is a safety rule and for when it's hard to hear hails. Either the conditions, the distance between boats at high speed, but it also burdens you with a double requirement. Now you need to hail because remember, 20.1 tells you how to do the hail. And now it tells you that the boat shall also make a signal that clearly indicates. Now, so now you need to do, you still have to hail and you still have to, and you now need to make some signal. Most common signals in team racing and match racing have been arm signals, but again, it's not specified. And the notice of race allows you to do this. Now, it can be voice, it can be radio, it can be arm signals, could be lights, can be whatever they specify. And it's for both the hail and the response.
So
and
Jenny,
the trick,
I'm going to ask, I'm going to put a scenario to you now in the Howth context. Well, not that one, but I think a few of us probably need that. But let's say we're sailing around the back of the island on a Saturday, pretty windy.
Yeah.
We're looking for a room at the back of the island from another boat. And so there's where conditions maybe that we can't hear the person because it's windy, because maybe your crew's talking too much anyway. But,
I don't think that's...
So The signal. What kind of signal are we talking about here? What if I'm to windward and I see a guy down to leeward? What should I expect?
So traditional arm signals, but remember, this is something that is clearly specified in team racing and match racing, okay, but not in this case. Arm signals will be, if you want to ask for room to tag, you'll go with your arm, wave your arm to windward, and the response is, come with the arm sort of indicating come across. But the trick here is if the notice of race, so we look at this rule backwards. If the notice of race is silent, then you'll do very, very well to figure out how you're going to clearly indicate the need for room to tag and the response. And the problem is that you want to be fault-free if that applies. So the best way is to ask the race committee what will be an acceptable communication that can be used at an event to clearly indicate the need for room to tag. And now that puts them to try to find the solution that was not in the notice of race in the first place. In general terms, sorry, go ahead, Emmet.
Yeah, we got a couple of questions here, and I missed a couple of questions from the earlier one. We might come back to them. Somebody's asked 20.4. So we consider a port hand ley line stack.
Yeah.
Okay, port hand ley line stack with more than 2 boats overlapped. The starboard boat is approaching and is on collision course with the leeward boat, with the leeward port boat. Okay.
We don't worry about the starboard boat so much. So the there has to be at least 2 boats coming on port. Yeah. Remember, the obstruction is the starboard ley line, a stack of boats that they have to keep clear from a boat that has right of way.
So here's the question. It leads on to the question. That was the setup of the scenario, and the question is the leeward port boat entitled to ask for room from all the boats to his weather rather than to Okay.
Yes, you are entitled, but be very careful. You have to give time for the other boat to respond, and if there's more than 1 boat, for the other boat to pass the hail, for the other boats to respond, and as they respond, whether it's by saying you tag or starting to tag, you cannot delay your tag. So your timing is critical. And, a lot of people quote case 3. Case 3, I don't have a picture of it here, but basically it says that a boat has not an obligation to alter course and avoid the starboard boats, etc. Sorry. But I think there's case 54 will tell you that you have to give time, perhaps even time to repeat the hail, or in this case, the signals, etc. So when you are using the call for room to tag to get to a starboard ley line and hopefully have a tactical game with it, you'll have to be very, very careful that you do it very, very precisely.
So it's about,
if that makes sense.
There's a lot of giving time there for the windward boats to react. So
you cannot just shout it and go ahead for it. You can shout and go straight up to, let's say, head to wind, not passing head to wind, because you are sailing within the room that Rule 19 gives you. That is room to pass an obstruction. But if you cross head to wind at that point, you're toast. Okay, so has to be careful. One has to be careful when he pulls that one.
Okay.
But again, going back to this, always ask the questions. And the one thing I would say is it is always very, very good to ask questions of the race committee or the protest committee in advance of the competition starting. If you are not clear on something, they'll post an interpretation. They'll post, in this case, if so they wish, what signals they want to competitors to use. Okay. Is there more on 20.4, Emmet?
No, just there are a couple on 16 too. So when we've gone on this one.
Okay. Now, this is probably, to me, the most important change in the rule book. It's my personal opinion. But anyway, redress is given under a number of circumstances. And one of them is when there's injury or physical damage because of the action of a boat that was breaking a rule of Part 2, or of a vessel not racing that was required to keep clean. Now, what does that mean? Sorry, I come backwards. The change is now that they've added this part. It says, injury or physical damage because of the action of a boat that was breaking a rule of Part 2 and took an appropriate penalty or was penalized. You would have been involved in a lot of, well, a few of you would have been involved in incidents where you've claimed redress. You go to a redress hearing, all you need to get is some ground facts that demonstrate that the other boat broke a rule. You get your redress, the other boat suffers no penalty. Well, now you do need to get the other boat either to take an appropriate penalty or to be penalized. So this is the other key takeaway from my point of view, is that if you are ever in a situation where you suffer damage, you first protest and then watch the other boat either take a penalty. If they don't take a penalty, you will continue with that protest. Now, I'd say, you know, is that clear enough, Emmet?
Yeah, I've got a question about that actually. Somebody brought it up a couple of days ago. So we've got a I've got to let me see. I'm going to just keep going because I'm going to reword what I'm going to ask actually, if you don't mind.
So yeah, well, I think that we're this. So you need to do that protest, see the outcome of the protest, and then the protest committee, or while you're in that hearing, you should then proceed to the request for redress part.
Yeah,
you know, so all the facts found.
That's the question I had in my head actually. Sorry.
Okay.
Do I need to submit 2 forms? So I got to. Here's the scenario. I'm on starboard, and somebody comes in, they clock me, and they damage my boat. I can't sail in the rest of the race.
Yeah.
So I'm going to look for redress there. Everybody, we'd all do that. I go in, submit my redress claim within time. So there's a protest time limit. Let's say it's 2 o'clock, and I've submitted mine at 5 to 2. All good.
Yeah.
And then I've got that, but now in the new rules or the changes to the rules, it sounds like I've got to submit a protest form against this other guy, or prove that he's retired or taken a penalty.
Yeah.
So now, I got 2 protest forms, or I got 1 protest form, or what? Can I write it all in 1 form, or what do I do?
Well, it depends. You don't have to. Protest forms have a number of boxes. You can tick as many as you feel you need to use. Not only that, the protest committees have the ability to change the type of a hearing, from a protest to a redress hearing to a reopening, whatever they feel it fits best the case the protester or the initiator is putting in front of them. So, you know, that should be easily dealt with. If you are stopped because you didn't submit 2 forms, that will be wrong. The same form goes for both things. Now, there might be incomplete details that they will want to hear from you. So they'll ask you, what do you think an appropriate redress would be? Things like that, okay? They'll have to, first of all, when talking about redress, to meet the clause of through no fault of her own, you know, do all the actions that you followed good enough to satisfy that principle, that you didn't sabotage your own race yourself so you could get redress in a way. Okay.
So the simple thing for us to do is, if we've got a redress claim, or port and starboard, I've been hit, I'm on starboard, I've been hit by a port boat, is I tick protest by a boat against the boat. So I'm protesting the other guy.
Yeah.
And I'm looking for the request for redress. And that kind of covers me.
Correct.
So I've protested the other boat and I've looked for redress all in one go.
You can take both. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so it's a safe option. Now, let's say I just look for request for redress and I just about got it in within the time limit. And then the protest committee said to me, well, you know, did the other guy retire or did he take a penalty or whatever? And I miss the protest against the other boat. It could get thrown out.
Well, so what the protest committee is going to do at that point, if you admit that you missed it, then that's fine. But if you say that the other boat took an appropriate penalty, they're going to want to have the other boat there to confirm that he took an appropriate penalty. Now, remember, at that point, the stakes are not high for the other boat because you cannot, the protest committee cannot start a protest backwards from a request from redress. They cannot go back into a protest to a boat. That can only happen forwards, if you know what I mean.
So I think it's a tricky one. I'm getting a couple of messages here, but it's tricky to follow. I get it. The simple thing to do is if you're looking for redress and you haven't got Mr. Port guy in the room to come in to say, I've retired, tick the box saying protest as well, and then you're covered.
Agree.
Something will happen in your favor.
You get started with the protest and mark 2 boxes, and that's it. You will get no redress until the protest committee is satisfied, let's say, that the other boat either took an appropriate penalty or has been through a hearing where he has been, let's say, disqualified. Only then, because if the other boat gets no disqualification, no penalty out of the hearing, you're not going to get redress either.
Yeah. Okay. So it's just
we can look at the other cases for redress, but not under this rule.
Okay. Let's tick the box, folks.
Yeah. Now, those are the bigger changes, realistically speaking. I think
just before we go on to the other the smaller changes, there are a couple of questions I missed here. So apologies to people who asked the questions and I didn't spot them. I had one box covering another. And the question is relating to Rule 16.2. So that's the one where we were talking about the starboard guy crosses and he's able to luff. And here's the question.
Yes.
In 16.2, can you now, as the starboard tack boat, tack after a port tack boat has borne away to go behind you? So this is the scenario at the bottom here. So that's
the scenario at the bottom.
Question, the scenario, I think I'm picking this up right. The port guy's coming along, Mr. Yellow's coming along. He's bearing away behind the starboard guy. As he's bearing away, the starboard guy tacks. Is that okay?
Well, sorry. There's 2 parts to this.
The starboard guy luffs.
The starboard guy loves to tack because if he tacks in front of him, passes head to wind, he's breaking Rule 13. Now, while he's luffing to tack, or that first part before he gets to head to wind, the other boat has to be given room to keep clear. It's not like you can just slam, your aft quarter into the bow of the other boat. You'll be done for breaking 16.1 for changing course and not giving room for the other boat to keep clear. What is removed from here is the requirement that alteration from the other boat has to be immediate. So now when you luff and the other boat has to immediately bear away, that's removed.
Okay, I think this is more or less the same version of the question. Hopefully I'm not doing anybody an injustice. Here's the question. So if you're on starboard,
yes,
the port boat is just about crossing. I think this is a slightly different scenario actually coming up here. But no, actually, it's a little more different the more I read it. So if you're on starboard and the port boat is just crossing you, you can luff to force the boat to starboard, to force the other boat to tack. I think that's different.
So what this rule doesn't prevent in the scenario at the top, the key of all of this is immediately. Okay, so a starboard tack boat can bear away towards a port boat, that even if the other boat was sort of sailing or starting to point to sail to leeward, if they want to force them to tack back to starboard, okay? But they have to do it early enough, okay? So the other boat doesn't have to immediately alter course, and they have room to go back upwind and then tack, okay? That's key. Is that immediate requirement? So you cannot do it very, very close. You can do it a little bit further away.
Yeah, okay. So you're giving the guy time. But if you've just borne away a boat
to
length,
time,
well,
Emmet. Room.
room. Yeah.
I know.
You can't just do it with a boat length to go. There's no
Well,
room.
it all depends on the conditions, but yes, I mean, I say in any boat, one boat length to go, unless you're going very, very slowly. It's and the boats could be very, very far away as well for that immediate requirement to happen. And now in fleet racing doesn't happen as much as in team racing, but it can happen.
Okay, I think that's all the questions we had.
Okay, so let's get on with the other changes. So this rule book has had about 99 rule changes, if memory serves, 90 or 100, right? And we have sort of a summary here because they are not critical in many ways. So we're going to touch on some of them. The slides will be given to you anyway. I'm hoping, Emmet. The definition of mark: an object intentionally attached to the mark is part of the mark, but not the anchor line. Before there was doubts of whether a dangling buoy or a fender was part of the mark or not. Now it's very, very clear it is part of the mark.
Okay, so let's say there's I'm at a laser event down in Baltimore or something, and the outer distance mark or the pin mark has got a flag on top of it.
Yeah.
That's intentionally attached to the mark.
Yeah.
So that is part of the mark.
You see?
Okay. But if I get tangled up in a dangling anchor line and I don't end up touching the mark, that's okay.
Yeah. With the flags, if you want the flags not to be part of the mark, you need to write it in the instructions normally. Okay. The definition of mark room adds a little expression there to add or pass without touching the mark. In the past, there was no reference. So mark room includes the room for the other boat to sail to the mark when her proper course is sailed close to it, and room to round the mark as necessary. Now this says room to round or pass without touching the mark, because it's not seaman-like to force another boat to touch a mark, although you might think you're giving enough room. Okay. Now the definition of obstruction that has a little bit changed, which now makes the lines and other small objects can be designated obstructions. So for example, if you were to have, again, laps around the course and you didn't want potentially boats to cross the start finish line until it was time to do so, you can designate it an obstruction. But when you do that, you have to bear in mind what you're creating. For example, room to tack and rule 19, room to pass an obstruction might become active at that point. Now, rule 14, avoiding contact, there's no change. They've moved the clause about exoneration to rule 43. Now, all the exoneration clauses that were before in rule 14, 14 B or C, I can't remember, sorry, 14C and 14B and 21 and 64.1A are now under a single rule. What this achieves is exonerate boats at the time of the incident, and which before you were breaking a rule and then you had to claim exoneration in a way. Now all of that is gone away. A boat that is exonerated does not break a rule. And the caveat in this rule, which in other ones there was a way around it to change it, is that this rule can no longer be changed in any way. We get to rule 42, pumping and propulsion and their exceptions. Now boats can now pump on a bit to windward if you're able to surf down the front of a wave. And you can pump as much as you like for those foiling to initiate foiling, but you cannot do it to maintain it. Okay, so those will be some ones. Now, this is one for those involved in IRC. The phrase was in the past sitting on the deck. On the deck has been removed. So it tries to give a little bit more leeway to the use of the upper thighs when hiking. Okay, so this will not be unfamiliar to a lot of you. So that's now less controversy around how much hiking is hiking, and you know, in trying to be a little bit more trying to give that leeway for people to hike a little bit more.
The old
then,
rule was you had to have your backside on the deck.
It said sitting on the deck.
Yeah.
And the problem was that many people, there's the definition of where is the deck or what's the deck, and the definition of you know, what is sitting, and all of those sort of things. So they're just trying to limit it a little bit of that to what in essence is what is happening on the boats out there. And the next one is this one. Now, I don't know how many of you put your hand up if you want to see how many are familiar with the term or how protest committees dealt with hearsay evidence. In the past, protest committees might not have allowed hearsay evidence. In fact, in many instances, they were instructed to disregard hearsay evidence. Well, now, protest committees are now required to take the hearsay evidence. The flip of, you know, the other side of that coin is you can bring in whatever you want, even the testimony from your grandma, which was looking with the binoculars up from, you know, from the shore. That's fine. The flip side of that coin is that all of that then is given an appropriate weight by the protest committee, which might be none. Okay, but at least it doesn't prevent you from bringing to the table. Okay. And there's what it's intended by hearsay evidence is any testimony or information of a person not present at the hearing presented to the protest committee by another person. Okay.
So can I let's ask it, because it comes up quite a bit in protests. Somebody says, well, you know, the guy to Leeward saw it as well, and he's definitely behind me.
Mm-hmm.
But he's not in the protest room saying, I was the guy to Leeward and I saw Emmet and the other guy hit him. But now I can say, the guy to Leeward definitely saw it. You know, I'm telling you guys, he definitely saw it. And then the protest committee has to decide whether they're going to listen to that or not.
But you have to bring him in. Is the responsibility again of the party to bring the witness to the hearing? So the protest committee very rarely will go out of the room looking for a witness. But yeah, so you can say, I'll give you. So for example, the testimony from someone that says, oh, so and so definitely saw it, didn't sail that around that mark. Okay. But if for example, if the race committee offers the passes of the marks, the rounding marks, and what boats have gone in which order, you know, that is given a different weight, as you can understand, because you know. So I hope that's clear. Now, we are not going to get. It's almost time. It's 10 minutes left, I think. So there's no much more left at this point to go into in terms of changes. So thank you very much. We take any more questions? Any?
I think there's a good comment here about that last point about taking hearsay evidence, and the example is that you can take a statement from somebody who can't come to the hearing, or you can present it.
Sorry.
You can present a statement from somebody who can't come to the hearing.
Yeah.
That's
and there's also, or you can take, for example, in the case of an injury, a doctor's report, the type of injury if someone is gone. But the key here is, well, you're not prevented to present that. There's other procedures around, you know, well, there was previously when you had indirect evidence, let's say a written testimony from someone, it will not be admitted in the protest hearing unless both parties accepted it, that they could not accept it, that they could not question that witness. Okay, now that's is given a little bit more leeway, but it's also given the protest committee the you know, some weight into how they are going to, you know, what weight they're going to give to that evidence.
Okay, I have a question here, and I know we're we're only a couple of minutes away. No, we've got time. I think we've got time to answer this, and this is interesting because quite a big change to the scoring rules. The question is, and people might not have the new rule book in front of them, so we'll talk through what it is.
Yeah.
The question is, what is the advantage of the scoring change in 90.3E? That's about the
Yes.
things that happen.
So, look, it's a tricky change.
Example of the problem before, and then what this tries to solve.
You may have an event that where it, the results have to be known to move to the next stage of another event. You may want to limit. So we need to understand that no results in sailing are final ever. Okay. Years after an event is still subject to a protest. If so, the parties are willing to bring it to the table, and someone has to hear that protest. Now, validity, etc., comes into the equation, but no result is final. And so, what you get with this is trying to put some finality to the event, especially if you want to move on to a next series or next part. So, for example, if you have a qualifying series and a final series, you can make Rule 90.3E available for, let's say, 24 hours. Put that limit in there, okay, to the qualifying series, but not to the final series, for example. It's just trying to make it a little bit more, especially events, very, very important events or high profile events, to do that. But everybody's welcome to use this rule if so they feel.
Okay, it just allows the event to be final, essentially.
Yes, in a way, but there's some exceptions around it. So, for example, anything to do with Rule 69, anything to do with an appeals committee, and I can't remember, there's another one there as well.
Okay, I think we've time for a last question here. The question is there a change that the race committee has greater powers to protest a boat?
Say that again.
Is there a change that the race committee has greater powers to protest a boat?
It has the same powers as it did before. In fact, what it does have, what it gains out of this new rule book, or one of the, if I'm interpreting this, is if a boat does not sail the course, they don't have to protest the boat. They can escort that boat, a new score abbreviation called NSC, straight away. Now, there are some times will it be appropriate to do that. There might be times where it's not appropriate to do that. And, there's, I think, there's a little paper circulating when is safe or advisable to do and when it's not. Certainly it wouldn't be advisable to do it unless someone in the committee boat has seen it. And, is someone that the race official can trust, if you know what I mean. Certainly you shouldn't do it if you're just hearing that so-and-so didn't, pass the mark. The protest committee, the race committee can always protest. There's no limitations on what they can, they can bring to the table.
Yeah. Okay, I think I've got, let me see, did I miss any? I hope I didn't miss any more questions. There are a few questions. I've got them here. I'm going to take a screenshot of them in case I do something stupid like delete them, which wouldn't be the first time I've done that. And we'll look at them. We'll bring them up next week. What we might do is send them around to the group, send the questions around to the group with the link for next week's, and people can have a think about them, and then we'll quickly go through them next week.
Yeah.
If you've got questions, think of them. They're probably going to come out over in your heads over a beer, more likely, and we'll try and deal with them. Yeah,
that was the plan all along, of having a second session, because you always start thinking of the questions afterwards, and it's good that we can address them. I see some from Ross and Teddy about scoring, and that's an important one. It's covered under, I think it's case 116, but I'm not sure. So that we can look into that one next week for sure.
Yeah, sure. there are definitely a couple of questions. And I know some of the stuff particularly it's difficult to take it in, but if you're not sitting there like rule nerds reading the rule book and listening to the chit chat about the change in rules, we'll maybe try and clarify one or two of the things we've talked about, or just
let me put it to you.
Examples.
So let me put it to them, to you guys watching and listening, is how important it is to read the rules well. So I'll ask you a question, and you can see if you can find it for next week. What rule, or where does it explicitly say which boats are the right-of-way boats? Does Rule 10 Port to Starboard say which boat is the right-of-way boat? Rule 11, Windward Lure, does it say which boat is the right-of-way boat? You know, all the Part 2 Section A rules, so 10, 11, 12, clear ahead, clear astern, will tell you which one is the keep clear boat. It will never tell you is the right-of-way boat. Where can we find that? There you go. That's a simple one.
Okay. Well, we've timed this quite nicely, I think.
Very good.
We're down exactly on time. So
perfect.
Good time management skills there. So we'll finish for this evening. I've got the questions. I've taken a screenshot even. If you've got any more questions and you're not sure how to get in touch with us, drop an email to Christina, or maybe even put it up on the HYC Facebook or something like that. Whatever medium works for you. Yeah. And we'll try and get back to it. And we will put this on the YouTube, the HYC YouTube channel during the week, and we'll link to it on social media so you can find it. So that's it. This isn't my real background, just in case any of you thought. I wish. Okay.
Thank you very much, everybody. Goodbye.